Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. History 101, Episode 19, Ancient Greek Geography. So this should be a relatively short one in terms of episodes. For Greece, there are really two aspects of geography that have an overwhelming effect on their history, and that is the mountains and the sea. Greece is this peninsula. It has water on three sides that juts out into the Mediterranean Sea. And it is covered by mountains. If you've ever been to LA, you know on the other side of the hills, there are all these little towns that are just surrounded by mountains, by the hills. So, and that's what Greek cities are going to be. They're going to be this city that they're going to develop on the flat land surrounded by mountains. Basically Glendale, California. So the mountains mean the Greeks are poor, poverty. 90% of the land is useless for farming. It's mountain. And so this is our first poor people. The Babylonians were rich. The Egyptians are stupendously rich. The Persians are nomadic, but they conquer themselves an empire and make themselves rich. The Hebrews are not in the best of circumstances because they're in a semi-arid land between a desert and another desert. And they don't have a super huge river, but they are a medium-sized power. They had enough flat land, enough ability to make enough money to be a respectable Mesopotamian people, as we talked about. The Greeks, on the other hand, are poor in comparison to other peoples. And that is going to drive a lot of what we're going to talk about. So the first thing is the mountains make the Greeks relatively poor compared to other civilizations. The second thing is that it means Greek society is isolated from itself. And you get the concept of autonomia, or where we get the word autonomy, the idea of ruling oneself. The idea of ruling oneself, autonomia. And this is the biggest value system in Greek society. The idea that you made your own rules, that the people on the other side of the mountains did not make rules for you, that there was no empire, there was no kingdom, that you represented yourself. You made your own rules, you made your own laws. Well, what's the form that this is going to take? What form does autonomia take? And we've kind of already talked about it, and that's the polis, P-O-L-I-S. The polis becomes the identity. So we don't talk about Greece when we talk about the ancient world. When we talk about Athens and Sparta and Thebes and Corinth, we don't talk about Greeks because there aren't any Greeks. There's no unity. There is Athens and Sparta and Thebes and Corinth. Now there's a Greek religion, there are Greek gods, there's a Greek culture, a Greek language, but there's no Greece. So the polis is this city, this small city, this urban population. So next to Babylon, this is our first really urbanized people. Like Babylon's a city, so they're urbanized. But as a complete culture, Mesopotamia is not really urbanized. Most people don't live in cities. In the Greek world, they do. In the Greek world, you lived in your city and you went to your farm to work. They are an urban people. And for that, you get civilization and trade. I mean, literally civilization. The idea of being civilized, as civitas, comes from the Latin, but it's one who lives in a city. It's the way we would use sophisticated today. And so you get this, the polis is self-ruled, autonomia, is urban, and provides all of the necessary pieces of civilization, but also trade. Well, you've got mountains. How are you going to trade? Well, that brings us to the second piece, and that's the sea. The sea equals connection. If the mountains separate people, the sea equals connections. And so those connections allow for commerce, but also for colonization. The Greeks are the first people we've talked about that don't stay in their homeland. They leave. Remember we talked about the Egyptians? The Egyptians don't want to leave Egypt. They like to stay in Egypt. You needed a great king like Ramses II to get them to leave Egypt. And then they didn't want to colonize. They didn't want to live in Cana or Phoenicia. They were perfectly happy going back to Egypt. Now, the Phoenicians we talked about, the people of Lebanon, modern-day Lebanon, like the Greeks, do leave. They do set up outposts. Carthage is the most famous Phoenician city. They do set up cities and trade hubs throughout the Mediterranean. So they are kind of a competitor to the Greeks, but because Phoenicia is dominated by the Persians, because those places are not necessarily, they're more for commerce than for colonization, then they tend to leave Phoenicia, and because Carthage basically becomes super important and super powerful. So, like, you get one colony. You know, there are lots of colonies in Phoenicia, Phoenician colonies, but the biggest will be Carthage, and kind of sucks up a lot of people who would have went other places because Carthage becomes one of the great cities of the Western Mediterranean. And so we have the sea. And so let's talk about colonization since we're talking about colonization. The first place they go is Ionia, the west coast of Asia Minor. Ionia. Right on the Aegean. They get on their boats, they go to the islands. From the islands, they go to Asia Minor. They go to the Black Sea, Cyprus, the north coast of what is today Libya. But also, and very importantly, southern Italy and Sicily. So many Greeks will move to southern Italy and Sicily that you get what's called Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. That it's not Italian. To the Romans, to the Latins, to the Etruscans, southern Italy is not Italy, what we call southern Italy. To them, it's just Greater Greece. There was no concept of an Italy. And so you get southern Italy and Sicily being Magna Graecia. You get Ionia on the Asia Minor west coast. You get the Black Sea and the Crimea. You get outposts at what is today Marseille and in Spain. And what these places did was provide food supplies for Greeks, for Greece proper. They push out less sophisticated peoples, ones who couldn't compete militarily. And it creates this frontier. All of these places, whether it's Magna Graecia in southern Italy, or Marseille, or in the north coast of Libya, they're all this frontier. They're more dangerous, which gives more freedom. They have more opportunity to do more things, to get away from the status of whatever you were in Greece. So you could go and, marry a local woman, start a new business, claim if you could beat up the local peoples and push them away from the coast, you can claim land for yourself. So it's kind of very American in its violence, but in its audacity. The people want to start over and make something greater. take a look at our other image. We have Greater Greece, we have Magna Graecia, we have southern Italy and Sicily. Look at where all the cities are located. They're all located on the coast. Almost none are located inland. Why? Because inland, you're tied to one road. You're tied to a road to one place. But if you're on the coast, you could communicate with anybody. You could communicate with Ionians, which is our third map. 25 or so cities right along the western coast of Asia Minor. You could communicate and trade with people in the Black Sea. It opened the world up. The Greeks are our first that we've talked about ocean-going people. Wherever the waters go, they will go. And why? Well, because they're poor, so they need stuff. They need stuff back home and they need money. So, commerce. What the Greeks are going to do is produce things. They don't have the Nile to produce a tremendous amount of food. They're going to have to import food from the Nile. That means they have to have something they could sell to Egyptians in order to buy food. So they're going to have to produce things. So all of these cities are constantly making stuff. Now, the good thing about the mountains, as we've talked about with the Hittites, is that they have minerals. A gold mine, a silver mine. You could get minerals out of those mountains and turn them into things that you can sell. Or, later on, actually just stamp them, turn them into coins. So it's like free money. And use that money to buy the stuff that you need. Commerce also creates allies. Greece cannot produce enough to feed itself. So Greek cities have to communicate. They have to connect to others. And so what you basically make are trade connections, allies. You have cousins. Remember the colonization? You know, a lot of Athenians went to the Black Sea and started a new colony. Well, who do they want to trade with? So they start a new colony in the Crimea. They set up their farms, right? They now that the Crimea is flatter and better situated, they make more food. They make more food than they can eat. So what do? Who are they going to sell to? Well, they're going to sell back to Athens, their cousins, the place where they originated. So you get these cousins populi. Magna Graecia is going to trade with Western Greece, with the Peloponnesus. That's going to be a big deal during the Peloponnesian War. That Magna Graecia, Sicily, and Italy are going to trade with Sparta and its allies, while Athens was getting its food from the Black Sea. That's one reason why the war went on so long and was so destructive. The third thing actually is it allows connection to older civilizations. Commerce allows a reason to go to Egypt, a reason to connect to the Persians. So oceanic trade with Egypt equals food, but also equals culture. Because, when they go to Egypt is at this point 26 dynasties long. It's some 3,000 years old. And so the idea was, whoa, look at all the cool stuff. We should take some of this stuff. I mean, the Greeks even took Egyptian gods. The 12 great gods of Greece, of Greek religion, are the same as the 12 great gods of Egyptian religion. They're changed for the Greeks, but they're based on the same model. Ionia, which is the western coast of Asia Minor, is actually in the Persian Empire. It got conquered by the Lydians. And then the Persians, Cyrus, we talked about him, conquered the Lydians. Well, when he conquered the Lydians, he got the Ionians in a 2-for-1 special. So the Ionians are actually living in the Persian Empire, which opens them up to trade. They were the end of the line of the Persian Asiatic trade routes. So suddenly stuff coming from India, stuff coming from Central Asia could end up in Ionia. And from Ionia, it could go to Greece. So the Ionian cities are actually richer than the Greek cities, than the cities in Greece. The Ionian cities have better trade connections. They make more money from their relationship with Persia because they're tied into the Asiatic trade in a way that the Greek cities in Greece are not. All right. So in our next episode, we're going to talk about what all that means. Thank you. Take care. Be safe.